Hello and welcome back. We are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is going to be the shadow, more specifically, how to turn your shadow into a strength. What if the parts of yourself that you reject the most hold the key to your greatest power? That is the opportunity that your shadow offers. Firstly, going into the shadow is a part of our unconscious. It resides within our unconscious, and that's why it's sometimes difficult to see or understand because it remains in a part of ourself that is in the unseen. First of all, I should mention that the unconscious is actually the gateway to your higher mind. I've heard this before, and I have to agree that when you think about how the unconscious operates and what it contains and the opportunity that it presents when we venture into the unconscious, it opens up more of ourself. It awakens our senses, it connects us more with our feelings, and it connects us more with our psyche, also the interpretations of our dreams. So it opens up an aspect of ourself that becomes very vast and also connected with our higher self. So perhaps the unconscious mind, which we would tend to think is in our lower realms, is actually part of our higher realms. Our conscious level of awareness is where we tend to remain, basically because that's how we've been conditioned and that's how society operates today. So it's very tricky to understand how the unconscious works, but the shadow is a very strong component of it. And when you understand your shadow, you're going to understand your unconscious and how it operates. So the shadow was coined by Carl Jung, who I'm sure you are familiar with, and he has termed the shadow as the part of ourself that we tend to usually repress, deny, or hide. So it's a part of ourself that can contain shame, fear, anger, resentment, grief, anything that we can hold on to unconsciously and that can perpetuate our behaviors. The shadow also is part of the collective shadow. Now, there are a couple ways of looking at it where the shadow can be almost a part of the collective unconscious or part of an energetic component in which a lot of people may operate by unconsciously, or it can be the like attracts like, where we tend to attract groups that resonate or that have the same beliefs in our shadow aspects. So for example, well, war is a perfect example, hatred, revenge, anger. So they will tend to attract like and perpetuate these circles that will reinforce the beliefs that they already believe that are coming from their shadow, the parts of themselves that they have not been able to see or recognize yet. So the shadow basically holds a relationship with our false beliefs. Our false beliefs, I talk about this often. Our false beliefs are beliefs that we have integrated from our family, from society, that are not our true beliefs. False beliefs are heavy. False beliefs are limiting. False beliefs are limited. False beliefs are very restrictive. So we can be very confined. We can hold ourselves back. We can be very projecting. And these do interplay with one another. The shadow and our beliefs are very much connected. So the beliefs are at the origin. You can think of them as the root. And then they will inspire or influence our shadow aspects, which can come in very strong. They can come in as anger. It can come in as greed, as jealousy, as criticism. And these aspects of ourselves we can be very ashamed of. They tend to sometimes have a life of their own. They come in very strong. They feel almost as if they're a different personality type of ours, or we may sit and reflect afterwards and wonder, where did that come from? How did that come in so strong? It felt like I wasn't even in my right mind. And that's how strong the shadow can be. But the greater awareness you have and can cultivate with these aspects without being hard on yourself, because the whole process of this is to identify them. When we see them, we may feel ashamed about them. We may feel upset. We may feel angry. We may feel discouraged. But this whole process of understanding our shadow and holding light to these darker aspects of ourselves is simply so we can see them. And once we see them, once we identify them and find the patterns associated, we set ourselves free. We integrate our shadow. We understand it more. We give an acknowledgement to it. And therefore, we become more whole. So we're not denying parts of ourselves. We're not saying, oh, I don't like that about myself, or avoiding it, or living with it, perpetuating it. We're seeing it, we're feeling it, we're sensing it, we're going in for self-inquiry and for analysis. Then we get to let it go. And so that's the beauty of this work. But in order to turn your shadow into a strength, that is going to require you understanding paradox. So paradox is going to be a very important aspect to understand. Paradox is a bit of an enigma. It's a bit of how one aspect can be opposing and opposite, yet they work together. It's a bit contradictory, but it still works as the same. So paradox is important to understand how to gain strength from your shadow. This also does tie into the gold within the shadow. Say, for example, if someone had very high performance standards because their parents did not approve of them or did not give them validation when they were young, they had to continually feel that they had to prove themselves and be successful and be type A. And through that process, they may have developed really good working ethics. They may have become a very fast learner. They may have become very resilient. However, because that is driven by a shadow aspect of fear or feeling unworthy or not good enough, there are going to be other imbalances that are going to be the repercussion of it. So there are strengths and weaknesses that the shadow actually can create. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not an exercise of looking at what's wrong with us. There's no such thing as wrong or right. And this is one thing that we need to get out of our mind and understand that everything has a purpose, everything has a place, everything has been created, everything can be transmuted. These are all the extremes. They are the polarizations of one, or the contrasts of one and another. So when we start to understand that we have dimensions of experiences and this whole right and wrong made society has placed this feeling that we are ashamed and we're not doing things right and we're wrong and we're bad and we're evil and we're shameful, etc. We place those conditions onto ourselves, suppressing these more negative experiences, not liking them, not wanting them, and pain and these difficulties, these fears do feel uncomfortable. They're not comfortable feelings, but again, when we feel into them, when we understand them, when we work with them, we get to let them go. We get to move through them. We get to become stronger, but it requires a shift of perception. And when we shift perception on us, that is truly where the power lies. But it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of wrestling, because when we're locked into what has felt familiar, into a certain perception, into a certain way of functioning, into a certain belief, we can become very solidified within that knowing, within that certain reality. Yet when we start to skew perception on it a little bit, and it does take inner work to look at ourselves differently, and our ego that has been hardwired based on fear, based on our false beliefs, doesn't really want us to look at anything differently because it likes its ownership and at stake over what has felt familiar, our persona, our identity, the way we've been used to behaving and acting and perceiving and all the like. So when we start to shift our reality, we're opening up something more. We're breaking a pattern and we're starting to question the way we've been behaving or feeling or acting, or even the origin root patterns within our unconscious can be dissected and analyzed, which will all have a very transformative effect. And then the next stage is understanding this paradox, looking at how we can turn some of these difficulties that we've gone through into actual strengths, looking at our reality slightly differently than we've been looking at it in the past, or where we've been comfortable living in. Example of paradox with a shadow can be transforming anger into strength, boundary setting, and personal power. So anger can be seen in our society as bad. We may feel bad if we have an angry impulsive reaction to something, or an angry impulse to do something, or even an inward response. We may all of a sudden feel, oh, why did I say that? That's so bad. I shouldn't be feeling that way. That's also part of our shadow and part of our false programming. But when we lean into it and we understand why we're truly feeling angry, then we can actually work with that. And the fuel that it gives us can create great transformation, alchemy with our life. And I should mention, now that I am on the topic of alchemy, you are an alchemist. We all are. And when we step into that role, we become incredible alchemists within ourselves, with our life, and we can transmute anything. We can transmute and change ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, our energy, our body. It is a very, very, very powerful practice when you get into this level of self-mastery. So when you can transmute anger into personal power, not the ego, not the wounded ego, but power, your truth, your fire, even being creative, creating something, taking action, stepping into a new role. This can fuel you if you can work with it consciously, if you are aware of it and can channel it into constructive and healthy avenues. The next one is going to be fear of judgment, transmuting the fear of judgment into authenticity and self-expression. So if one has fear or has had fear of judgment, fear of being criticized, fear of being shamed from society, that can be transformed and transmuted into stepping into one's full authentic self and empowering oneself to rid themselves of the internal fears and the reactions to people's projections onto them. So seeing the interactions of other people, understanding other people and their wounds, and reclaiming ownership and authority within themselves to become more empowered to share their light, their wisdom, their knowledge with the world. Control issues can be transmuted into leadership and decisive action. Control, by the way, I should say, is perpetuated by fear. Control within the body, within the physical manifestation, will also be tied to arthritis, stiffness in the joints, and stiff body movement. So you can think of someone who's rigid, who's controlling, who likes to hold on, likes things done a certain way. This can lead to a very strong ability to lead and to be very organized and very systematic. Once control, the fear-based relationship with control, has been transmuted into fluidity and flow, they can take what has been learned and apply that into their ability to lead, to create great success, and to build. So basically, this shadow exercise allows for a flip on the challenge, the internal challenge, to be transmuted, to be transformed into a strength. So even if you are going through any of these difficulties or anything else, try to see how you can flip it. What is the opposite of what you're experiencing and how can you get there? So as I mentioned, integrating the shadow is when you are consciously working with it, when you can look at yourself a little bit differently, your patterns, the inner challenges through a different light, and start to transmute and change them, working through your fears. I'm going to give some steps here on how to do that. But integration is when you're starting to work with it, when you're starting to also sense and feel. And there are stages that are very subtle and very under the surface that need to happen for you to adjust. So do give yourself some time with this, because when you're breaking patterns, when you're working with the unconscious, when you're working with the shadow especially, there needs to be a certain amount of time, and time is not in the time construct that we're used to. Time is a natural time where your body needs to align, your energy, your emotional state, and your mind, and so your mental patterns. And so this whole interweb of experiences or aspects of yourself will adjust and align accordingly to the change that you are starting to create within yourself. So here are some steps on how to turn darkness into power. So first, you want to identify the shadow. What triggers you in others? What qualities do you judge? Where do you feel resistance, fear, or avoidance? The second step is going to be observe without judgment. So the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, it is to acknowledge it without shame. The third is shift the narrative. So this is reframing. You can ask yourself, what is the strength within this trait? For example, I fear conflict. Well, the strength could be I value harmony and deep connection. The fourth step is going to be embody and integrate. So feeling the strength to be your truth rather than succumbing to the relationship with the shadow aspect. Some prompts that you can work on can be, what is one shadow trait I can reframe as a strength? How has my shadow actually protected or served me? And then finally, express it consciously. Find a healthy way to express your hidden qualities. This could be through art, movement, communication, or action. Owning your shadow means owning your full self. So when you're working with your shadow, remember to be compassionate. Remember not to judge yourself, and remember to give yourself some grace as you work through this process. Be curious, question inward, flip things around, upside down, and you will see and you will be able to uncover hidden truths within your shadow, within your unconscious. As Carl Jung stated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And what he means by this is until we can see what we haven't seen before, the unconscious will continually perpetuate our actions, our perceptions, and our direction in life until we shine light on it and see it. But if we don't, we will simply just call it fate. We will succumb to the idea, the notion that, well, this is just the way my life is supposed to be, or my life is just not supposed to be better, or maybe I can't get ahead and this is as good as it's going to get. But we have full ability to change that script and to turn everything around. So that concludes the exploration into the shadow, turning the shadow into a strength. I'm wishing you all the best on your journey and beyond. And don't forget to sign up for the Shadow Project. This is an extensive program unlike any other. You will be able to explore your shadow in ways that you have never explored before. So there's more information on the Shadow Project in the information area below. And I'm wishing you all the best on your journey and beyond. Take care.